God isn't whispering anymore. He's shouting this from heaven. You lost a good woman, and now you're going to feel every ounce of what you threw away. Let's not soften the truth today. Let's not dress it up. Let's tell it exactly like it is. Because heaven isn't whispering anymore. God has raised his voice, and what he's saying echoes loud and clear. You lost a good woman, not just any woman, a woman hand-picked, molded, and sent by God. A woman who loved with depth, served with grace, prayed through tears, forgave beyond reason, and was betrayed without mercy. This weekend, while you've been quietly tending to your soul, the narcissist has been unraveling, crying, breaking, talking to people in desperation, searching for answers, but none of those tears, not one, is enough to undo the damage they caused when they took your love for granted, because this time it wasn't just your heart they wounded. They offended the God who placed you in their life as a blessing. And when someone abuses a divine gift, heaven responds. This brings us to what they're feeling right now, and why it matters so deeply for you to know their tears are real, but God closed the door. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when consequences no longer wait for permission. That moment has arrived for the narcissist. And yes, their tears are real. Their pain is not fake. They are finally feeling the sharp edge of the sword they swung so carelessly for years. But now that blade has turned, and it's cutting them open with every memory of you. They're crying this weekend. Not the performance tears they used to manipulate you. Not the shallow emotions they conjured up when they needed something. No. This time the crying is different. It's gut-wrenching. It's full of regret. It's saturated with panic and confusion. They are breaking down in the quiet hours of the night, overwhelmed by the unbearable weight of losing something, someone they never truly deserved. But don't mistake that crying as repentance. Don't confuse emotion with transformation, because what they're mourning isn't the damage they did to your heart. It's the consequences of their own actions finally showing up. Loud, unavoidable, and God-ordained. They're not grieving what they did to you. They're grieving the reality that you're gone. They're grieving that their manipulation no longer works. They're grieving the fact that your silence speaks louder than all their apologies ever could. And here's what you need to know deep in your soul. This is not the beginning of their healing. This is the beginning of their judgment. See, God gave them time. He gave them warnings. He placed conviction in their spirit. He sent signs through your tears, through your patience, through your presence. He whispered in their conscience, nudged their heart, and delayed consequences just long enough for them to turn. But they didn't turn. They twisted. They took your love, your loyalty, your faithfulness, and threw it to the ground like it was common. They desecrated sacred ground. And now God has sealed the door they never thought could close. You didn't slam the door on them. Heaven did. And when God shuts something, no amount of begging, no outpour of weeping, no apology, no matter how tearful, will be enough to reopen what divine protection has locked shut. Their access to you has been revoked by the one who gave it in the first place. This isn't cruelty. This is closure. Divine, irreversible closure. And if you're still wrestling with guilt, wondering whether it's Christian to walk away, wondering if Jesus would approve of you stepping into peace while they sit in pain, hear this clearly. Jesus forgave the thief on the cross, but he did not invite Judas back to dinner. Grace is holy, but it is not blind. God's love is unconditional, but access to your heart is not. You were never called to be their redeemer. You were sent to reflect God's love, not to replace his judgment. So while they cry over what they lost, you must remember what you endured. the nights they blamed you for their chaos, the days you worked to fix what they kept breaking, the years you invested in their potential while they buried you under betrayal. You offered peace. They chose pride. You offered partnership. They chose power. You offered healing. They chose control. And now, in your silence, they are left to face a reality they thought would never come. That they lost a woman who carried the anointing of God's favor. That the one who prayed for them, stood beside them, forgave them, covered them, believed in them, is gone. Not just physically, spiritually, emotionally, irrevocably gone. They may reach for you, but they will reach into silence. They may cry for you, but God will not send you back. They may replay every memory, but memories don't reverse decisions made in heaven. And you, woman of God, must not second-guess this ending, because it wasn't you who made the final call. It was God. It was the same God who heard your cries when no one else did. The same God who saw your breaking heart behind your brave smile. The same God who knew how long you held on and how much it cost you to finally let go. And now He's making it loud. Loud enough for the narcissist to hear. Loud enough for the spiritual realm to witness. Loud enough for the world to know. You lost a good woman, and you will not get her back. Let them cry. Let them sit in the stillness they created. Let them feel the silence they once used against you. Because now that silence belongs to God. And as they drown in the emptiness they never thought they'd feel, we step deeper into what your presence truly meant in their life, and how your departure wasn't just personal, but prophetic. You were a gift from God, and they spit on holiness. You weren't just a chapter in their story. You were a lifeline. You weren't some passing moment, some convenient option, some maybe while they explored their what-ifs. You were a divine appointment, a vessel of grace, a woman sent by God, wrapped in patience, clothed in compassion, and anchored in truth. You came into their life carrying peace. You came with the intention to build, to nurture, to heal. You didn't come to take, you came to give. You didn't demand worship, you offered prayer. You weren't perfect, but you were pure. And in a world so noisy, your love was one of the few things that still sounded like heaven, and they despised it. They took sacred and treated it like ordinary. They took divine favor and handled it like trash. They mocked what they didn't understand. They confused your humility with weakness and your silence with submission. They made you feel invisible while they enjoyed the very light you radiated. They drained your strength and dared to blame you for being tired. They dishonored you while still expecting access to your spirit. And worst of all, they thought God wouldn't notice. But God was watching the whole time. He watched you forgive when no apology came. He watched you pray over a man who betrayed you daily. He watched you believe in their potential even when they abused your presence. And in your long suffering, He saw something sacred, something they never saw. To them, you were just their partner. But to God, you were a vessel of protection in their storm. To them, you were the one who always stayed, the one who always believed. But to God, you were His daughter, the daughter He placed in someone's life to show them what real love looks like. And they spit on holiness. You didn't love them with convenience, you loved them with covenant. You fought spiritual battles on their behalf that they'll never even know about. You warred in prayer for a future they never earned. You forgave them long after your heart had the right to stop trying. And still, they lied, they cheated, they slandered your name, they ignored your boundaries, they played with your loyalty, they desecrated a temple they should have guarded. And now the temple is gone. God removed you not just to protect you, but to prove something, that his daughters are not disposable, that his favor is not casual, that his presence in human form through you is not to be mishandled. They didn't just lose a relationship, they lost favor, they lost access, they lost the last person who would have ever interceded for their soul. That's what makes this judgment so unbearable. Not that they're alone, but that they were once loved by someone who was sent by heaven itself, and they still chose darkness. And now? They don't just miss you, they miss the peace that came with you, the covering, the intercession, the way life felt blessed when you were near. And for the rest of their life they will search for that kind of love again, but they won't find it. Because love like yours doesn't repeat itself. It was custom designed by God, assigned to them for a season, and they wasted it. You were a miracle in disguise, and they laughed in the face of grace. So, woman of God, if you've ever questioned your worth, don't. You weren't too much. You were too holy for a heart that refused to repent. You weren't the problem. You were the protection they rejected. You weren't difficult. You were discerning. You were sacred. You were sent. Let this truth settle into your soul. They didn't reject you. They rejected God through you. And no one walks away from that without consequences. So walk on, beloved. Walk in power. Walk in healing. Walk in the unshakable truth that God pulled you away not because you were weak, but because you were too strong to waste on someone who couldn't see eternity standing in front of them. If this part reached your spirit, comment below with the words, "I was God's gift, and they didn't see it." Let the truth speak for you now. God has removed his hand, now they stand alone in what they chose. There is a terrifying kind of consequence that doesn't come in a burst of anger or a loud display of vengeance. It comes in stillness, in the absence of protection, in the quiet withdrawal of God's presence. That is where the narcissist finds themselves now, not because you cursed them, not because you retaliated, but because God removed his hand from a life that chose deception over truth, ego over humility, and pride over grace. When God's hand lifts, it doesn't always look like disaster at first. It begins with discomfort, small cracks, little things going wrong. But gradually, the light that used to warm the room disappears. Peace becomes scarce, joy feels distant, nothing satisfies, nothing fulfills, and no relationship brings the safety or depth they once took for granted. What they feel now is not just regret, it's divine abandonment, and there is no one to blame but themselves. You were not just a presence in their life, you were a shield. Your love covered them in ways they never understood until it was gone. While they mocked your discernment, it was your prayers that kept them from falling. While they rolled their eyes at your faith, it was your intercession that delayed judgment. You stood in the spiritual gap, day after day, unknowingly restraining the full weight of what their choices should have brought down on them. But no one stands in the gap forever, especially not when they are being crucified for it. There came a point, not all at once, but quietly and clearly, where heaven said, "No more." Not out of spite, but out of righteousness. Not to punish them, but to protect you. God had seen enough. He had heard your cries, watched your soul bend under weight it was never meant to carry, and observed the way they exploited your capacity to forgive. And so, God intervened. Not with thunder or fire, but with distance, with release, with silence. He removed his presence the moment they rejected the blessing he gave them, you. He let the narcissist have exactly what they claimed they wanted: freedom from accountability, freedom from boundaries, freedom from truth. But they didn't realize that when you walked away, God walked with you. and now they are left with the hollow echo of their own choices. They may try to pray now, but the heavens feel closed. They may seek comfort in new relationships, but they can't recreate what you carried. They may search for clarity, but confusion follows them like a shadow. Because what they lost was never just you, it was divine order, divine peace, divine favor. When someone mistreats what God has blessed, eventually the blessing departs. And when it does, what remains is a life that looks the same on the outside, but is spiritually barren within. They might still go to work, still post on social media, still pretend they're fine, but inside they are unraveling, quite painfully, completely. And the worst part for them isn't the silence, it's the knowing, the sudden awareness that this isn't a break, it's a severing. This isn't a pause, it's a permanent shift in the spiritual order of their life. Because God does not play games with the sacred, and He does not leave His daughters in environments where dishonor is normalized. So now they sit in a reality they constructed brick by brick, only now realizing they built it with the wrong materials: lies, manipulation, arrogance, lust, and control. They once believed they were building a castle. Now they see it was a cage, and they are the only one left inside. This is not revenge, this is consequence. This is divine alignment, restoring balance after you were misused for far too long. It may not be loud, it may not be dramatic, but it is final. And in that finality, there is no room for manipulation, no space for illusion, and no more access to you. Because when God removes His hand, it's not just the loss of comfort, it's the loss of hope. And that's what they're feeling now. The weight of a future that will never include the light you carried, and the God who walked beside you. Your silence speaks louder than their begging ever could. There was a time when they could break you with just a few words, or worse, with their silence. A cold shoulder, a calculated delay in their response, a withdrawn affection that left you aching for answers. You remember what that felt like. How your heart twisted in confusion while your soul reached out, still hoping to be seen, still clinging to the idea that love could be restored, if only you held on a little longer. But now everything has changed, because now you're the one who is silent, not to play games, not to punish, not to manipulate, but because you've outgrown the noise. You've healed past the point of needing to explain yourself. You've finally realized that peace doesn't beg to be understood, that love, real love, doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't chase people who walked away from sacred things with their eyes wide open. And your silence, it terrifies them. Because it's not angry, it's not reactive, it's not desperate, it's resolute. It's the sound of finality, the sound of someone who has been through fire and emerged no longer willing to be burned. It's the voice of someone who has learned to listen more to God than to the echoes of manipulation. They expected tears, they expected rage, they expected the same old cycle: break you, watch you fight to fix it, and then let you carry the blame. But what they got instead was the absence of all of it. The stillness that followed your exit was louder than any screaming match, more powerful than any letter you could have written, more haunting than any confrontation they rehearsed in their head. You didn't slam a door. You didn't post a bitter message. You didn't gather witnesses or seek revenge. You just walked away, with your dignity intact, and your heart handed back to God. And that, more than anything else, has exposed the depth of their loss, because deep down they knew you were the emotional anchor, you were the stabilizer, you were the safe place in their chaos. And now that you're gone, every room echoes with the emptiness of your presence. Their words are falling into a void you no longer inhabit. Their apologies, if they come, bounce off the walls of a space you've spiritually vacated. You're not waiting for an explanation. You're not sitting by the phone. You're not debating whether to send one more message. You've made peace with the unanswered questions. You've made peace with the broken promises. You've accepted that some people will never own what they did, because to do so would require them to face a version of themselves they've spent their whole lives avoiding. And you're done trying to rescue people from their own refusal to grow. They're begging, maybe not with words but with energy, with indirect attempts, with sudden check-ins, with conversations you never asked for, with longing stares and shared memories and reminders of what was. But nothing they do now can penetrate the wall that God helped you build, a wall made not of bitterness but of wisdom, not of revenge but of discernment. You learn the difference between love and attachment, between soul ties and spiritual assignment, between keeping the peace and protecting your peace. So now they're left with the echo of what they lost, and the realization that your silence doesn't mean weakness. It means closure. It means strength. It means that while they were playing with your presence, you were quietly preparing your exit. And when you left, you took the warmth, the safety, the prayer, the kindness, and the last chance they would ever have to be loved like that again. Your silence speaks, and it says everything they refused to hear when your heart was still speaking gently. Divine vindication is unfolding. You're being lifted up. There are seasons in life when vindication doesn't come with applause or witnesses. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It comes quietly, like morning dew settling on a field after a long night of storm. It comes in peace. It comes in the subtle shifts of the atmosphere that only heaven and your spirit can truly discern. That's the kind of vindication God is bringing to you now. You may not realize it in full just yet, but something has already turned in your favor. Not because you forced it, not because you proved your case, and not because you fought back, but because God saw it all, and He is a righteous judge. He saw the private betrayal, the emotional neglect, the spiritual cost you paid to love someone who only took, who only drained, who only dishonored what was sent as a blessing. And while you were left alone to carry the pain, God was taking record. He's not just a healer, He is a restorer. And He's not just restoring what you lost, He's restoring who you were before you were made to feel small, before you were gaslighted into silence, before you were diminished, blamed, overlooked, and slowly erased in a story you were never meant to be written out of. He is lifting you up, not just into healing, but into honor, into clarity, into alignment. And you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to defend your truth. The one who vindicates you isn't moved by public opinion. He's moved by righteousness. And righteousness has always been on your side, even when it looked like you were losing, even when they made you feel like the villain for setting boundaries, even when they turned others against you with twisted versions of the truth. Divine vindication is not about revenge. It's about visibility. It's about God revealing, in His perfect timing, who was sent by Him and who mishandled what was holy. It's about exposing hearts and restoring the honor of those who never should have been humiliated for trying to love well. And while the narcissist spirals in confusion, while they wrestle with the void left in your absence, God is placing you in a season of restoration that they cannot interrupt. You are being lifted spiritually, emotionally, and even relationally. New people are entering your life who recognize what the last one couldn't. They see your grace as strength, your empathy as wisdom, your loyalty as sacred. God is replacing false connections with divine appointments. You're not just healing, you're ascending, not because you chased justice, but because you trusted the one who sees in secret and rewards in due time. And here's what they never expected, that you would rise without revenge, that you would grow without needing closure, that you would find joy without them being a part of it. But this was never about them. This was always about you returning to yourself, the version of you that existed before you gave so much of your soul away, trying to prove your worth to someone who was never equipped to hold it. This is what vindication looks like in God's kingdom. It's not a courtroom. It's not a spectacle. It's not a dramatic takedown. It's a holy realignment. It's the hand of the Lord quietly raising you, while those who mistreated you are left to sit in the very silence they once weaponized against you. You're not just being lifted from pain. You're being positioned for purpose. Everything that was used to wound you is now being used to prepare you. The tears, the prayers, the nights you felt invisible, none of it was in vain. All of it was seed. And now the harvest has begun. The narcissist may still be weeping. They may still be reaching. But you've stepped into a season they can't access, because divine vindication has made it clear. What once tried to break you is now beneath you. And the one who allowed the breaking is the same one who is now rebuilding you. Higher, stronger, and more whole than you've ever been. You were the mirror of God's love, and they broke it. You weren't just a kind woman. You weren't merely patient or forgiving or strong. You were so much more than what they allowed themselves to see. You were a mirror of God's love, not perfect, but pure, not flawless, but faithful. Everything you gave came from a sacred place, a place inside you that was shaped by mercy, tested through pain, and refined in prayer. You were not just offering affection, you were revealing to them how God loves, deeply, sacrificially, persistently. You were showing them what grace looks like with skin on, and they broke it. They shattered the mirror, not because it was flawed, but because it reflected a truth they weren't ready to face, a truth about themselves, a truth about what they lacked, a truth about how far they had wandered from the voice of God. Your love didn't just make them feel seen, it made them feel exposed. And instead of letting that exposure lead to growth, they retaliated with destruction. You offered understanding and they answered with silence. You gave second chances, and they used them to dig deeper wounds. You covered them in intercession, and they cloaked you in blame. And still, for a long time you stayed. You kept hoping. You kept praying. You kept pouring from your soul in the belief that love, real godly love, could break through the hardness of their heart. You believed the best. You were loyal even when it hurt. You forgave while still bleeding. And you gave them what most people would have never had the strength to offer. A mirror that revealed not only who they were, but who they could become if they would just surrender. But they didn't. They couldn't. Or more truthfully, they wouldn't. Because surrender requires honesty. It requires humility. It requires looking into that mirror and admitting that you are broken, that you need help, that you've hurt someone who was sent to heal you. So instead of facing what your love revealed, they blamed the mirror. They called it too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too intense, too demanding. But what they really meant was too holy, too pure to be controlled, too deep to be manipulated, too true to be twisted. So they did what many do when they are convicted, but not yet repentant. They destroyed the reflection, hoping that would eliminate the truth. But breaking the mirror never breaks the reality it reflects. And now they are left with shards, fragmented memories of someone who loved them in a way they'll never experience again. Your love was not loud, but it was persistent. It was not flashy, but it was real. It was not transactional. It was transformational. And that's what makes the loss so unbearable for them now. Because what they destroyed wasn't just a relationship. It was a chance. a divine opportunity to encounter something sacred in human